Close that. Okay, so hello and welcome to our What's New webinar series. As mentioned in previous series, this is, or previous session, should I say, this is designed to summarize and take you through the changes that have been made to Colleague as part of our latest release. In that case, this is 25.08.02, and that was the release that was deployed at the last weekend. If you'd like to ask any queries, please do so via the Q&A area during the session. Ideally, if you can keep the queries relevant to the session, i.e. based on the features that are being shown, that would be ideal. But the session is also being recorded as well, and subscribers to the What's New series will be sent a copy of the session afterwards. We'll also upload it on YouTube, and we will post it on social media as well. So let's get started. Got quite a fair amount to go through in this session. So let me just close that down. But I'll start just by going through the basics. Effectively, when all users were upgraded and when you were upgraded, you would have received a notification which advised that you've been upgraded, and then a link to a release notes which you could click on. Alternatively, you can go to the help file, and that would take you to obviously what we have there available in our help file, and the current release top left hand side of the help file, and also the video at the top there, and this option here takes you through into our release notes, which is 25.08.02. So this is the August development work that was deployed on the 7th. And what I'll do basically in this session is go top down through the release notes and show each of those features in the system as we're kind of working through those points. So we'll start with the tasks area, and ultimately it's ongoing with our agenda around performance. Ultimately, we've done a lot of work with regards to the performance of the system in terms of the load of records, and also the running of various different workflow. But one of those things that took a fair amount of time when you were working within it was tasks. Obviously, tasks is feeding from Microsoft's API, so there's the delay of us receiving that task data, but it's not enough to warrant the delays that were being experienced when people were using this area. But ultimately, yeah, effectively we've done a lot of work here, so the retrieval of tasks, the update of tasks, the editing of tasks, it's all a lot faster, a lot more streamlined in terms of the way in which it works. Ultimately, if you use tasks, then the functionality of tasks hasn't changed. You will just find it to be a lot more responsive and easier to use because of obviously performance being that much better. So that's the tasks area. The next one along is to do with candidates. Oh, sorry, on tasks, I should have mentioned there is also now a refresh button and also a search that was added as well. So again, that's just to help you with finding tasks as well. Okay, moving on. The next thing along is to do with the candidate, and that's the ability to refresh a candidate summary. So if I go to a candidate record, the candidate summary is this option that it can be hidden if it's not of interest, but ultimately the candidate summary is to give you an AI generated summarized text about the candidate with a view to you then using that as a merge code. It's available as a merge code to then pull through into a template, or it can be pulled through obviously into documents, formatted CV, for example, for the profile at the beginning of a CV. But that summarized text was previously only populated by the CV parser. So effectively, yeah, that's fine for new records that you're adding into the system, but it's not any good for existing records that are obviously already there on the system. So effectively what's been added is this refresh button. What that means basically, if you go into any candidate record, the candidate record will need to have a default CV. So within the documents area, there'll need to be a document that's marked as default. But as long as it's got a default record on here, you'll be able to click that refresh button. It will upload that document, that summary default document, perform the AI analysis, and then obviously bring back the text for its summary. And that obviously is available on every candidate record in the system against that summary box. So that's the update that's been made there. And again, it's part of our AI roadmap as we work through that agenda. We've got obviously a series of updates that are being kind of introduced to the system sprint after sprint, and that's just another one of those AI-based updates that's now live and available for everyone to use. Right, the next one along is the sidebar extension. So colleague has introduced a sidebar extension that's available on Edge and Chrome. This is for when you are in social media. I'll use my LinkedIn profile as an example here, but it doesn't have to be LinkedIn. It could be some other social media that you're using. Zing is another example, Twitter, Facebook, other examples as well. But the scenario effectively is when you're on a candidate record, you can click on and install this sidebar extension. It brings up a sidebar view, and then you have this option of lookup record. Lookup record will look at the LinkedIn URL that you've got there, and then effectively it will essentially scan the social media profiles on your system and bring back any records that are matched to that URL that you've got. So if I hit lookup record there, it brings back records that I've got in the system that have got obviously that LinkedIn URL set up there. But if it's a case that's not there, I could type in to look up a record in the system. Obviously got quite a lot of David Paynes in my system here. That obviously gives you an ability to view a candidate record, again, while staying within the profile, creating a history, again, while staying here, typing whatever you need to type in there. You can then hit create link. That will link the LinkedIn social media, in this case, that URL through to the candidate record, and obviously give you then a means to go back to it at a later date. So if I clicked on that now and went to a candidate record, or the candidate record, should I say, you can see that LinkedIn URL has been, or LinkedIn icon has been highlighted there. You've also got other features like the ability to attach a document to the record as well. The ability to see the document, the record skills is all available within this area as well. Obviously clicking through the record we just demonstrated. And there's obviously the ability to add new records to the system also. Obviously I'm looking at a candidate record, but you've got the ability to look up all main record types. And obviously if you wanted to create a new candidate, you could hit create there. We do not scrape the page as part of the add new process. It just gives the ability for you to create a record from within here. Obviously mandatory fields are highlighted with a red asterisk there. But yeah, effectively we do not scrape the page, obviously, because that's in breach to LinkedIn terms. Obviously you have access to lists as well, access to your recent items as a way of quickly accessing records that you're working with, and fundamentally we will continue to add functionality to this system, or to this sidebar, so that it becomes a docked part of our suite as part of Colleague. There's obviously no cost associated to downloading the extension. To do so, you can go to the Edge store, and you'll see it there, Colleague Edge store, and you'll see obviously it's available. We do also have it on the Chrome store as well, so it's available there to access within the Google Chrome store also. We advocate Edge. Ultimately, it's in terms of it being obviously the Microsoft browser, but also it retaining the 365 authentication token for the longest duration. It means that you have the strongest user session if you are in Microsoft Edge. So that's our advocated browser, but obviously again it's available within Chrome and Edge because ultimately they're very similar to each other these days. There's only one other thing to mention, and that is that there is a check when you're switching between the active browsers. So what that's basically meaning is when you're doing the lookup record, it's looking at this URL. If I was to change this URL, so if I was to go into someone else's profile, you can see here that the active tab has changed. So it's asking if you want to do a refresh. If I hit yes on that, it then refreshes the sidebar. That's so that then the lookup process is then looking up on the basis of this URL rather than the previous one. So that's what that blue bar means at the top. When you're switching between different profiles, you want it, if you want to use the lookup record function, you want to hit that as yes, let it refresh, and then you can use that lookup function there, as you'd expect. But that's the colleague sidebar extension tool, and that's available for download. Okay, so moving on to the next one along, and that's the long list option. That's when you're now long listing a candidate, and to be honest, it's when you're using any lookup mechanism, to be fair, but it's been done for the purposes of long listing, but there are obviously multiple other scenarios where it'll be useful. So what I mean by all this is when you're on a requirement or when you're on a candidate, on a requirement, go into the candidates tab. You've got obviously a candidate option there to long list the candidate. When you click on that now, you'll see these options that have been added in here. So choose from search is obviously the fact that you've got these search options and ability to type in and search there. Choose from list. If you click on that, would switch this to a drop down of your lists, and those are lists that you have access to or that you have had lists shared with. It will include those lists in here as well. Obviously, you can select one or multiple items in here, hit lookup, and obviously it will bring through those records there. The other scenario is choose from search. So if it's a case that you wanted to select a search that you've previously worked with, let's say, you could look up a search. Again, it brings through your search records. You can click on those, and obviously then have the ability to select one or multiple records at once and long list those. All the kind of checks that would previously have been performed are performed as well. So obviously, if a candidate has been booked against this company or has a future placement, you're given that warning, as you always have been. But otherwise, obviously, it bulk long lists those records against the requirement, as you can see there. But yeah, effectively, if you're doing any lookups in the system, you'll notice that those options are there now. Any kind of scenario where you're looking up records. The only instance where it wouldn't do something like that is if when you're doing a lookup and it's fixed to look up against a particular type of entity. So for example, if you're doing a contact lookup here, you're fixed to look up contacts against this company. So if you're doing that, it wouldn't have those options. But any scenario where you're freely looking up a record in the system, you will now have those options to choose from a list or choose from a saved search result to pull through that record into that selection lookup. So that's the update that's been made there. Next one along is notes maintenance. What's meant by that is within admin, if I go back to admin here, you have notes as a templated area here. And what you can now do is use merge codes with your notes as part of the record being registered. This is really to accommodate the scenario of a client having a list of questions that they would ask as part of onboarding a candidate, maybe, and then maybe they put that into the notes area. And those questions might have they might have information within those questions that need to be merged from data against the record as part of that record being created. So it accommodates that scenario. The other main scenario is for requirements. So if you have a specific job template for description that is created, again, based on the contents of the requirement, and they should be pulled through into the job description. Again, that's now accommodating that scenario as well. But essentially how it works, if I was to click create new candidate, you can see in the notes area that it's got the merge code. But if I was to put in date pane there, hit save, quite a few duplicates there, never mind. What you can see is that it registers, and obviously it then converts that merge code to bring through the data from the merge code. So It's to be used obviously based on those questions, those onboarding processes, those scenarios where you need to template your notes to pull through information as you want to. Obviously, it's there to now be used. Next one along is to do with history icons. Yeah, so if I go to this Canada, I think that's probably got an example. Yes, it does. So it's essentially for any email related histories or ultimately any histories that have got a document attached to it. Effectively, what you've now got is a attachment icon that you can see there. So if I go to this email, you'll see that it's got obviously a document there that's there for preview. Obviously, in instances where it's not got that document or it's not got a document, it will just not have that attachment. But this is obviously a very quick way for you to then view the histories that have actually got attachments by clicking on those. So that's the attachment icon there. On any histories, any records, if there's an attachment icon there, it means that when you open that history, it's going to have a preview document there. And obviously there's workflow here as well to attach that document to the existing record or to download it. Those options have been added there as well. Next one along is timesheets, or should I say the new timesheet received date field. So this is to accommodate the scenario of effectively you want to record when timesheets have been actually submitted to you as a business. So on the timesheets tab, again, it's add new timesheet now. You'll see this timesheet received date field that's been added there, and obviously that can be any date that you see fit. It might have been that you're adding this timesheet to the placement, but you receive this timesheet back on this date, and that way, then when obviously the timesheet been created, obviously there's a tracking of the received date of the timesheet. If a timesheet is being added via the portal, then the received date will be stamped with the date where that candidate submitted the timesheet through onto the system, which may be different from its created date because they may have created a draft and then they might be submitting it through when they've confirmed that it's ready to be submitted for approval. But yeah, the received date is a track of when you physically receive the timesheet into the business, and that's there as an option now. The next one, I'm just checking if there's any questions. No, I'll keep going. So the next one along is to do with use group permissions, and that's setting whether certain candidates, or sorry, certain users can edit candidates if they're in an existing placement, if you get that working for us alert. So what that basically means, I use this one as an example. So what would normally be the case, and when it was deployed, we wouldn't have turned it on for anyone because, or turned it off for anyone because it obviously wouldn't have affected users day to day. But if a candidate is in a current working placement, for some businesses, they then do not want users to be able to then edit their contact information for whatever reason, just to make sure that obviously that data is, you have that sort of retained contact with the candidate without it being something that could be changed. What there is now an admin option. If I go to use group permissions within admin, get admin there, and if I select, it's under candidate, you've got this option, edit candidate details when working for us. If we set that to no access, and I was to go back to our candidate and hit refresh, what you can see now is the alert obviously comes up advising they're working for you, but these fields are now grayed out. They can't be edited. There's still other fields on the record that are still modifiable. You can still change these fields, but specifically the contact information about the candidate cannot be changed, to, again, just to retain and ensure that that's not something that can ever be lost for a candidate that you've got in an active placement. So that's that option there. And again, that's the edit candidate details when working for us, use group permission, because it might be that for some users, they have the rights to do that and others, they do not. Just look up the set to full access as well. So that's a different thing. I said the candidate parser. I'll show that in a second. Cool. Okay, next one along is the requirements working for us check. This is a minor update, but it was a an important one of the same. Effectively, if you had a candidate that was in a current placement, there is a user group permission on setting whether or not a candidate can be contacted in bulk, especially if they're in an active placement, and you can obviously stop them from doing that. However, out in the real world, there's obviously multiple scenarios where you could be reaching out to a candidate for the purposes of making them aware that their placement is coming to an end, or I'm sure they knew that, but also just trying to make them aware of other opportunities that you might have they could be interested in. And that alert was stopping people from being able to make those emails. So what there is now is an option where if you are dealing with a candidate that's in an active placement and you were sending an email, you'd now be given this warning. Rather than it stopping you from sending the email entirely, you'd just be given a warning that they're in an active placement and do you want to continue. So the user is warned they're in an active placement and they can decide whether or not to say no or yes. If they hit yes, obviously the email is generated and they can proceed with arranging or sending out the email. That's a sort of minor update there, but important all the same. Next one along is to do with the company. So if I go to a company record. So on the company record, under View More, Invoice and Payment Details, it used to be that the invoice method and the payment method on a company were called invoice/payment method, but realistically only the invoice methods were listed here. If a company is being treated as an umbrella company or a limited company, then ultimately the payment method, the payment information needs to be pulled across. So what we've done now is obviously added a payment method user drop-down or a drop-down email sent, which is the same payment method as what would be on the candidate record for payment details. But it just means that this is an umbrella and there is a payment process in place that you'll be having with that company. You can store whether or not the payment method that you'll be using with that company. And obviously that payment method will be pulled through onto the placements. If I go to a placement and go to back office, obviously if a company was being pulled into there, it would pull through that payment method then into that area, which is what it previously wasn't doing. So that accommodates that scenario now, the payment method being added obviously against the company. The colleague Outlook add-in also had some updates as well in this release. If I go to the Outlook add-in, effectively, it's been there for quite a while now, but ultimately it's available. If you go to the help file, you'll find where you can download it if you haven't got it. But yeah, effectively the Outlook add-in will work based on the selected email. It will bring up a preview of the file, of the record that's been stored in Colleague. Also, when you're creating a new email, the Outlook add-in is there to give you options like attaching files, again from Colleague, attaching CVs, for obviously it being recorded as CV sending workflow, and also using templates as well. That's available when you're actually sending an email. But for the purposes of obviously this update or changes that were made, a couple of things. One, the log email option, when you were hitting that, it wasn't recording the email. Well, it was recording the email, but it was recording it against the wrong time zone. It was doing it against the user's time zone rather than recording against UTC, and then that ultimately, then when you go into a history table on a candidate record, the histories are automatically updated in terms of their dates based on your time zone, rather than it being stamped with the time zone at the point of adding the history. It needs to be stamped with UTC and then have that conversion process when you're opening up the history table. Probably a bit too much info there, but yeah, effectively that was a bug that was fixed. Also, the HTML of emails when you're logging them as well was coming through. That's been sorted also. And when you're, if you're not using the parser in Colleague, it will now use the user group permission that defines whether or not the parser is seen on the in the navigation. So there's a parser here. there's a view candidate pars, a view contact pars, and it was the view candidate pars, the one that matters. Ultimately, if that's set to no access, then when someone's using this pars and they hit show attachments, they don't have access to pars through the existing pars method that's available. Obviously, if that was set to full access, then we close that off and then hit the colleague option there. Again, it loads the view, but it's this time checking your user group permissions, seeing if you've got that privilege, and if you do, the parsing options are available. So that's the pars attachment or pars and long list. Both those workflows obviously will work based on whether or not you got the permission there now. But those are the Outlook adding updates, and again, more updates will come with regards to that. Starting to move into some of the minor UI tweaks, just some helpful things that have been done. So on the report side, you'll see the help file option has been added there. So that gives you just an ability to see our report user guides. Obviously, Colleague has lots of different types of reporting: user overview reporting, team overview reporting, summary dashboard based reporting, and then obviously the reports. And even the big screens, the Colleague Insight as well. So there's a report user guide there, but obviously it's just to give you that means of doing that, giving feedback as well, which is always invaluable to us, or contacting the support team. Again, we just try and put those options throughout the system in key areas, and that was an important area to put that functionality in. The resource buy has been added to the Working For Us alert. So again, a minor UI change, not a big thing at all, but if a candidate is in a current placement, that resource buy option has been added there now, so you can see that when you're seeing that Working For Us alert. The lookups search bar being added to the lookup codes. I mean, this probably only means something to if you're an admin, but ultimately when you're in the lookups area within admin, it's example being history codes is the classic. Obviously, history codes can have lots and lots of different history types, so it can be a real pain to find those history types. Whereas now you've got a search bar, so you can just type in, the history that you're looking for, and it will bring up obviously everything where there's a match to that. And then obviously, if you want to then make a change, you can obviously make a change to that history code. So it just saves time with dealing with different histories, and obviously searching and finding the history codes that you want to change. But that's the same to be honest, on all the lookup codes. You just have the means to filter very quickly now on different lookup codes, just for when you're doing admin in that way. Arrow icon, that's kind of a minor one really. On the notes tab, this icon here was pretty small and was being missed by some users. So the expand option there has just been made a bit more apparent. That's it. Obviously, in expand, you get a standard toolbar when you're working within that area, and then you get the expand option for the other options as well that are available within the editor. The interview icon, which is off the requirements tab. So if you're on a candidate record, go to the requirements tab. If that candidate has been in an interview, you will have that interview icon there now. That was previously not there. It's there on in other areas of the system. If you're on a requirement, for example, we missed it on here, so that's been added down. So basically, if you wanted to see the latest interview of this candidate on this requirement, you could click on that, and it opens up the interview record, which effectively just gives you a summary of the interview details, and obviously gives you a means to perhaps resend that interview confirmation as well from the interview record, or edit the interview if you want, or you can cancel it. Just hit back there. There's this one's it's a minor one really. So when you're merging records together, if you're merging some companies together, if a company has been associated with some placements as an umbrella company, it shouldn't be something that you can merge, because obviously it's going to affect placement data. or if it's a limited company, again, it should be something that you can merge, because again, there's placement data that's linked with that company. Previously, there was not a check to see whether or not that was there. So if you merge together some companies, you could then go to a placement, and then you go to the back office tab, and there's errors everywhere because it's lost that company. Whereas now, effectively, it won't let you do that. It will perform a check and just make sure that company is not linked with existing placements. Report targets, currency, again, not particularly exciting one, but I'll show it all the same. Essentially, the currency of a target value can now be stored against a target. There's still work to be done against different panels and reports based on the variations of currencies. If you were looking for that value to then to go through exchange rates and so on, and obviously be recalculated based on the assigned currency versus the base rate. There'll be some work that be needed there if you've got any custom panels that's doing that sort of thing. But the key thing that was needed to begin with was just make sure that you had the means to select a currency against a target, which you now do. So effectively, you've got that target option in there. How are we doing for time? past. Right. So GDPR merge fields. So obviously, GDPR as functionality is available on the candidate and the contact, but it's now available on the requirement as well. Really for the purposes of obviously emailing candidates, and ultimately, if I was to select these as examples, effectively, if you want to seek GDPR consent as part of, if you wanted to seek GDPR consent as part of, to put them forward for a requirement, it would be essentially this would be the workflow that you would follow. So you'd select the candidates that you want to email, and then on the email form under merge fields, you've now got GDPR confirm and GDPR reject, and those options are there. So ultimately, you could have a template which is obviously requesting GDPR consent, or as part of sending that email, you could incorporate these merge fields to confirm or to deny consent in regards to GDPR. And that's obviously being sent from a requirement to the candidates that you've longlisted, but effectively the options are there to do that now. Next one along is the GDPR thumb icon. Historic, or the old version of this GDPR workflow was really that you could only request GDPR consent via clicking this button. Whereas now we've moved to a point where obviously it's available as a merge field, and so people have been able to create their own templates, and it's not really a factor anymore. But some clients might still use it, so it's still there. But ultimately, for those that don't use it and don't want it to muddy the waters and would rather, if you're sending out a GDPR request, you do it just through the template or do it for the merge fields. There's now a global setting to hide that option. So if I go to, just go back to here, global settings, type in GDPR. Then you've got here, hide GDPR request icon on candidate form. You've also got it to hide it on the contact form as well. By default, obviously, it'll be set to no, and so that there was no impact when we rolled this out. But if you set that to yes, and if I go to here and I refresh this candidate, when you are then doing that email, obviously that GDPR thumb icon is gone. So it's, again, just saves that being taken out if it's muddying the waters or confusing anyone. From there on, we're into bug fixes, which we don't cover as part of this session. Obviously, you don't really demo a bug fix, but ultimately, feel free to review these options or these fixes as they're done. They've been based on obviously feedback or requests that are coming through support for support tickets. But ultimately, bug fixes are standard as part of any software deployment. You deliver enhancements, enhanced or minor, and then you deliver bug fixes to obviously refine the product further. As part of this session as well, just to give a heads up to features that are being worked on as well, I'll quickly show a couple of things. So I'll just go into our dev environment quickly, just to give you a heads up on a couple of things that are being worked on at the moment. So there's two things. One is lists. For the longest time within the lists area, I've forever had this question of how do I add a record to a list from within the list area. It's been a bit of an omission that we've not had that option in fairness. So there will now be this add to list option. So you'll be able to create obviously a new list, but there'll be an add to list option here. And then if you wanted to add in someone, it does a quick search, so you're searching over the whole system. But if you wanted to add someone, you could then add that person just to that list you've got selected, or you could add it to that list and another list as well, maybe, or several lists. But that obviously adds those records to lists. So that will be helpful, and that'll be part of the next update, which at the moment the next update will be on the 5th of October. So this is heads up of that being available at that time. Also another update that's going to be part of that release, which is kind of a big update that's been worked on for a bit, and it is going to be really helpful, I think, for quite a lot of people, is the access to the address book from the email form, which is finally going in. So what that basically means is that when you are in a record and you go to click email, we're gonna have it so that the emails are coloured in as well, just to offer a bit more colour to this page. But yeah, effectively, what you'll now have is, if you are typing in an email, it will look at your address book. It will bring up emails that are found in your address book, and we'll pull those through. It'll also link them. If it finds a matching record in a colleague, it'll obviously link that record to that email address as well. So it's really moving away from it only being about colleague records that are in colleague in terms of email, and moving to a place where it's that similar functionality that you have from Outlook when you're typing the email and you're giving the different records or different email addresses that are linked with what you're typing in. We're basically aiming to add that functionality. So that will be available. It will be deployed as part of permission. So that will need essentially that permission to be granted at an admin level, which we'll cover obviously with various people, client by client, when the time comes. But as as a big update that we're making, it will be the means of being able to look up and find different records and different email addresses from within the email form, rather than obviously what's previously been a limitation of just selecting and adding or manually typing in the email address. So that's the updates there. I will now just check if there's any questions, which they're not. Okay. So that's the end of the What's New session. Thank you very much for your time. We'll conduct another What's New session in October, no doubt. Until then, take care. Speak soon. See you later. Bye-bye.